Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for some Saturn versus PlayStation action. Now last time out, ISS Pro 98 defeated Worldwide Soccer 98, giving the PlayStation an 8-6 advantage in the series. Today we've got racing action, more specifically motorcycle racing, in the form of the Saturn's Manx TT facing off against the PlayStation's Moto Racer. Now both games came out in 1997, only a few months apart, so I'm optimistic today's video should be a close encounter. So like always, we're going to start with visuals first, and we're going to start with Manx TT. And Manx TT is quite a good looking racing game from the Saturn's library, in all fairness. It's bright, colourful, very clear, easy to see what's going on the courses. There's lots of trackside detail as well, I feel, on the courses, which is nice. It makes them more interesting to look at as you race around. The frame rate is a consistent 30 frames per second. It doesn't slow down, so that is good. And also the screen layout, I feel, for Manx TT is pretty decent too, with your speedometer in the bottom corner and your map in the top right corner. I feel Manx TT's quite appealing visually overall. Now there are some negative points for Manx TT. First of all, you'll notice there is pop-up on the longer stretches. You can just see everything popping up in the distance, and that is a little bit irritating. The white line in the middle of the road has sort of got this peeling pop-up effect as well, and I do find that quite annoying, if I'm perfectly honest. There's only 2 courses as well, so there's a lack of variety visually, and I feel for me that's probably the biggest flaw in the looks department for Manx TT. There just isn't a lot to see. The bikes don't look too bad, the riders don't look too bad, but they're probably not quite as good as they could have looked, in my opinion. So overall, I feel Manx TT is a relatively good looking game, but probably not right up there as the best looking racing game on the Saturn.
Passing the checkpoint.
So moving over to the PlayStation for Moto Racer next, and the first thing I noticed visually was the fact that this game doesn't seem to have anywhere near the same amount of trackside scenery as Manx TT, and it means Moto Racer's kind of got this barren style. I do feel though that's probably what they aimed for, because a lot of the courses are in sort of like deserted areas where you can see off into the distance at the side of the road. So I feel it's going to be a question of preference, what kind of motorcycle racing you like in terms of the visual aspect in that regard. In terms of its performance, it runs at a consistent frame rate. I've got no issues with it there, but the graphical engine isn't as solid as Manx TT, I feel. There's a lot more glitching on this game, bits of screen tearing. If your motorcycle comes up against the side of the track, kind of glitches through it, and so it's not quite as impressive in that regard. But Moto Racer does have other things in its favor. The viewpoint choice is much better on this game, because you can have a viewpoint where you see the whole entire motorcycle, something you can't do on Manx TT, which I found a little bit irritating. And of course, Moto Racer has got far more visual variety. There are far more bikes on this game, and there are far more tracks to see, and they're all strikingly different, which is a massive plus point in Moto Racer's favor. So overall, coming up with a winner visually is difficult, because I feel the game I should say, Manx TT, looks better, but the fact that Moto Racer has just got so much more to see means that counts in its favor massively. So I'm going to have to say, overall, in the looks department, it is a tie. So moving on to sound effects and music, and one thing that I don't think is in doubt is the fact that Manx TT has a much better soundtrack than Moto Racer. Far more effort and care has been put into these tracks, and as such, they are far better quality music to listen to whilst you're racing. I feel the ones on Moto Racer are just quite generic and bland, and they're not very inspiring at all, whereas at least the soundtrack for Manx TT is much more lively and just much better to listen to. There is less full-length music tracks within Manx TT, and that's probably down to the fact there's only 2 courses, but the fact that it is better cannot be denied. Now in terms of sound effects, I actually feel Moto Racer's got the edge in terms of sound effects. I feel the motorbikes and the motocross bikes sound better, their engines sound better, and there's some cheering in one of the levels as well within Moto Racer as well, so that gives the game a little bit more atmosphere in terms of the sound effects. But I feel overall, because the soundtrack quality is much higher on Manx TT, it comes out on top in this area. But what I'm going to do is going to give you a few examples of the Manx TT music and a few examples of the Moto Racer music, so you can have a listen and come up with your own conclusions. We're going to stick with Moto Racer first for gameplay, and one thing I noticed whether I was playing with the D-pad or after I changed to analog control was the fact the game just feels that little bit too twitchy and too responsive to play, and it can be a little bit frustrating, and it does take away some of the enjoyment, especially from the standard motorcycle races on the courses. Now, in terms of the motocross races, they control better in my opinion. They feel a little bit more realistic and they are definitely more enjoyable to play. And actually when I first played this game I didn't realize it was a complete 50-50 split between standard races and motocross races, and I'm glad that the game does have the motocross areas in because they are the better playing part of the game. So on to Manx TT for gameplay, and if you'd only played this game with the D-pad, you'd probably be saying the same as what I said for Moto Racer. It's too twitchy, too responsive, not very enjoyable, but thankfully you can use the analog pad and the steering wheel, and this game benefits massively from that. It becomes much smoother, much better to control, and as a result is a better playing game than Moto Racer. Even in the motocross sections, Manx TT plays better than Moto Racer. Full stop. Staying with Manx TT for content and lifespan, we've got an arcade mode, a Saturn mode, a time trial mode, and a 2-player mode. Arcade mode just lets you pick the 2 courses from the arcade mode with no choice of motorcycle and race them and try and come in first place. Saturn mode enables you to go through a 4-race tournament, so to speak, where you need to place 3rd or higher in the first 3 races and then win the final race to unlock the Superbike challenge. You can pick your motorcycles in this mode of play. Obviously it's just the 2 standard courses and then the 2 courses in reverse order. We've got a time trial mode which is self-explanatory, and we've got a 2-player split screen as well. Now there isn't much content in Manx TT. When I reviewed this a long time ago on the channel, I nailed the game in this regard because it just doesn't have enough to keep you coming back to more. Yes, there's a cheat code to enable you to race around as sheep, but it really doesn't add anything long term to the game. Yes, it is very hard to do the Saturn mode. I'm not going to lie, you'll run out of time really easily, and you really need to master the courses to be able to complete that, especially on the Superbike challenge. But the fact there's only 2 courses in the game is the absolute killer for me, because you will get bored and tired, and it is repetitive doing the same races over and over again.
Passing the checkpoint.
One thing I don't think you can do for Moto Racer is criticize it in terms of content and lifespan in comparison to Manx TT, because we've got 1 and 2 player modes, easy, medium and hard, practice races, single races and a championship mode. We've got 10 courses in comparison to Manx TT's 2, and we've got a choice of superbikes and motocross bikes as well, meaning that this game has far more content and lifespan than Manx TT. The 2-player mode is better as well because it performs much better graphically than that of Manx TT. So overall in content and lifespan, it really is a no contest. Moto Racer comes out on top. So like always, I need to come up with an overall winner, and without a doubt this comparison video was the hardest for and the closest one that I have ever done in the series. Prior to recording this footage, I had never played Moto Racer, and I was pleasantly surprised by actually how good it is overall, and it really comes down to a couple of factors I think in determining an overall winner. I think Manx TT is a slightly better playing game overall. I think the motocross races on Moto Racer are actually good and they're quite enjoyable, but the on-track races are better on Manx TT. Now the other thing is taking into account that Moto Racer has far more content on offer here, far more tracks, far more bikes, far more things to do, and it actually has a dedicated championship mode. And I think for me, that is the deciding factor in this, and that is why Moto Racer comes out on top. Having more content and more lifespan, far more of both than Manx TT, means Moto Racer, I feel, is the better game overall. Yes, Manx TT is actually slightly more enjoyable to play, and I feel it is slightly better to play, but the fact that it just has nowhere near the amount of stuff to do as Moto Racer means that Moto Racer comes out on top. It means the PlayStation is victorious again, and the PlayStation now has a 9-6 advantage in this comparison series. Now, of course, these are just my opinions and my opinions alone. If yours differ, if you think Manx TT is a much better game than Moto Racer, or if you agree with me, let me know with a comment down below. And like always, I'll be back at some point in the future with another Saturn versus PlayStation video. Goodbye for now.